Thank you very much, Rector. Fantastic to be here at this meeting of the General Council. I think I'm what is known as the warm-up act. And I'm sure you'll be very keen to hear from the new principal, Peter Matheson. But we did think it was perhaps a little unfair to ask Peter, as a very new arrival, to look back at the year 16-17. So that's why I'm here today. And I'm going to follow, broadly speaking, the approach that Tim O'Shea has taken in the past. But I'll probably run through a little bit quicker, given that I'm sure you want to hear from Peter. So I have a few slides to begin with, which are about the composition of the student body. This one shows our head count, not our FTE count, our head count, which is now nudging 40,000. One thing I wanted to pick out from this is that group there. 13% of our students from other European Union member states. Now, the academic year 16-17 was very shortly after the referendum. We might not have expected too many effects, but just moving forward beyond the period of this report, it's good to note that we haven't seen damaging effects on the recruitment of students from the European Union. In fact, they've nudged up slightly in the latest intake. And I think that's the story, really, across the board so far of the impact of Brexit. The impact of Brexit has led to our engagement with the EU increasing. And I think that says something about this university. So more students. We are now #1 university in the UK for incoming and outgoing students on the Erasmus programme. Since the referendum, we have seen a net increase in EU staff numbers of about 250. And we have seen our applications and income from EU research grants increase significantly. And I think that says something about how the university has offered reassurance to those already here who may have had concerns about Brexit, but also those students and staff thinking of coming here. And I'm very pleased that we've got this far. Who knows what the future will hold. Level of study by college. You can see there the split between undergraduate, postgraduate taught students and postgraduate research students. I won't comment too much, except to note that we are still around about 2/3 undergraduate in the makeup of our student body, which is somewhat distinctive among the world's leading universities, and I think says something about the commitment of the university to a very strong undergraduate student experience alongside the outstanding research distinction that we have. Domiciles on entry, students from outside the UK. What we see there is that China has unambiguously overtaken the United States. They have been neck and neck in the last few years. China has moved ahead, while we are still the #1 recruiter of US students in the UK. So we have a very, very strong global profile as represented in those two top lines, but also what you see below. And the blue bars there, of course, are EU domiciled students, that group I just talked about. The only real concern there, I think, is India. I think that Indian number should, in effect, be as big as the Chinese number, given the links of language and history that we have. And this is an issue we have raised with the UK government on a number of occasions to advise them to change the tone of the immigration discussion in the UK, which has dissuaded students, especially from India, but also other parts of the world, from coming. And we have heard recently that the number of visa applications for Indian students to come to the UK has been growing. The restriction there appears to have been relaxed, which can only be a good thing. A final point to note about the makeup of our student body is about gender. we are a majority female university, and that majority is growing. Now, on the one hand, that's fantastic when you think of where we were even a couple of decades ago, when we were very much male-dominated. But there may be a sense that one of the things we have to focus on in the future is attracting more young men to come to this university, especially young men from disadvantaged backgrounds where we have a really significant deficit. So this may be something you will notice both in the activities of the university in the coming years, and I hope in that table and its equivalent in future years. Now I have a next set of slides which records all of the professors appointed to the university in the year 16-17. There's lots of them, so I'm not going to dwell long on each one, but I'm picking out the odd person who I think is especially noteworthy, but also emblematic of some of the things that the university is passionate about. And the first one here is a colleague, Alison Kozlowski, in the School of Social and Political Science, appointed to a personal chair last year at a relatively early career stage, and you'll hear about her next year because she will be on the list of Chancellor's Award holders for outstanding teaching. And that's fantastic. This is a bright, relatively early career colleague who actually has a very significant physical disability. And I think that level of achievement, notwithstanding disability, says something both about her, but also, I hope, about how the university nurtures all of its talents. I'll shoot through the other professorships in the College of Arts, Humanities and Social Science and the first page of Medicine and Vet Medicine, to dwell for a moment on Jeff Sim, Professor of Global Agriculture and Food Security. Now, Jeff is leading our work in re-establishing agriculture as a specialism of this university, developing what will likely in due course be a school alongside the vet school out at Easter Bush. But it's not agriculture as we may have known it. This is high-tech agriculture, which is the focus of this work, with a very strong emphasis on animal genetics and a very strong emphasis on what has become known as the agricultural Internet of Things, interconnected sensor devices which help us understand how to maximise productivity in crops and in animals. And I found myself talking with mock confidence, I guess, about things like estrus in pigs. Now, some of the medics here know what I'm talking about. Others may not do. It's basically pigs in heat, and we are world leaders in pigs in heat. Using sensor technologies to identify the best possible moment for insemination, which can have an extremely significant impact on the productivity of breeding pigs. So you do learn new things every day in my job. Let me move on. College of Science and Engineering. I've picked out David Aspinall here, Professor of Software Safety and Security, or as we have come to know it, cyber security. Many achievements in that field, including our recognition as a member of the National Centre for Cyber Security, a UK-wide network, but extraordinarily important. At one level in terms of national security, and we've heard lots of the issues around that, but also in terms of financial institutions and every institution, because as digital technologies become more pervasive, their resilience and security becomes all the more important, and I'm delighted that we're at the forefront of that field. Another page of Science and Engineering. Let's skim over that so we can get to the USA Teaching Awards. Very much a fixture in the annual cycle of important meetings of the university, the Teaching Awards evening. I've picked out one here, the Best Course Award, delivered by Chris Brouard and Nikki Moran from Edinburgh College of Art. And I picked that out in part because Chris Brouard, a vice principal of the university and the head of the College of Art, winning a prize for teaching. And I think that says something about the shift in emphasis in the university, that a senior leader like that is giving such commitment to teaching and to his students. Sadly, he's left the university now to become director of, I can't remember what of, but at the National Galleries. He's effectively the number 2 in the National Galleries now. So a great loss for us, but a fantastic example to set. And then there's I've put all of the best overall teachers there. We have awards for medicine, vet medicine, science and engineering, and humanities and social science. Outstanding colleagues all. And I should say just how sought after these prizes have become. If you get one of these prizes, this is really a career highlight. It gets a very prominent place in the CV, and it gets a very prominent place in promotions applications as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if we, in not too long, see professors Byrne, Richardson, Bolcombe and Budd with teaching and the evidence of a teaching award as a very strong part of their case. And I should acknowledge the role of the Students' Association in designing and leading this awards process. It's been a fantastic achievement on their part. University awards, again, I'll just pick out some individuals. These are the Chancellor's Awards on this page, given at the annual dinner where the Chancellor attends at Holyrood Palace. And the one I've picked out here is Leslie McCarra and Susan McVie, an award for the impact of their research. These are an utterly formidable duo working on youth criminal justice, looking at pathways into and out of crime of young people, especially in disadvantaged areas. And the prize was really recognising the latter part of that equation, paths out of crime. They have had an extraordinary impact in opening up life chances for young people who might in earlier times have thrown them away through the path that they had taken. Absolutely brilliant. And Leslie McCarra is also our Assistant Principal for External Relations, and projecting that kind of commitment into the relations with the communities around us is, I think, a big advantage for us. Moving on, Principals Medals here. I picked out Amy Woodgate, who was very much at the heart of our work in delivering our capacity to do MOOCs, Massive Open Online Courses. Now, you will have heard from Tim O'Shea in the past and Jeff Hayward before him about the vision that they had and the leadership that they gave to it. But we wouldn't be where we are, and where we are is one of the universities in the world which has the highest reach around the world through its online presence. We wouldn't be where we are without Amy and the work that she did to establish the technologies, to mobilise the academics, and to give us that reach. So I was delighted that she won that award. TAMDL Prize for Excellence in Engaging the Public with Science, John Oberlander. Extraordinarily sad that John passed away last December. A brilliant science communicator. And I guess that some of you were at the celebration of his life that we had in the Playfair Library, which I think was the biggest ever attendance we have had in the Playfair Library. Thank goodness no one from the fire service was there, because we were way over capacity. 200 seats. I estimate another 300 people standing at the back of the room, recognising brilliant achievement. Moving on to the Queen's Honours, I've picked out at the bottom of the list Kathleen Hood there, who won an MBE in that list for her work in widening participation in higher education. And if any of you recall Kathleen, you will recall the the deep passion and commitment that she had to opening up opportunity for students from disadvantaged backgrounds. So it was wonderful to see that recognition. I didn't, because I didn't really want to embarrass her while she's sitting at the front table, also highlight Harriet, who is on that list. But I will say something about Harriet's work, which has been extraordinary in establishing this university as a welcoming, multi-faith environment. And I think that's something which we may underestimate, because it is extremely important for the well-being and the experience of many of our students. So I'd like to thank Harriet for that and to note the very well-merited award with a round of applause. Moving on. Next Queen's Honours list. I've picked out Colin Adams here. Some of you may have encountered Colin. He was the driving force in the commercialisation of our research in informatics, leading our business accelerator body Informatics Ventures for about a decade. And it's no coincidence that in that decade, this city emerged as the second most important centre for tech entrepreneurship in the UK after London. Now, lots of people contributed to that, but I think we can safely say that we wouldn't be such a big centre of tech entrepreneurship in Edinburgh had Colin not played that role. So it was, again, wonderful to see that recognised. We've had some very prominent recognition of research. A Nobel Prize winner in that year associated with the university, and our local Nobel Prize winner continuing to pick up additional recognition, Peter Higgs. But I wanted to pick out John Saville there. John has retired in the last few months as head of the College of Medicine and Vet Medicine. And has been an extraordinary leader in that college for 15 years or so. He can be awarded in all sorts of ways for that outstanding leadership. But it's wonderful to see a recognition here of John, the outstanding researcher in his field of kidney medicine. On the research side, I also wanted to pick out Andy Hine. Who's won a very significant award from the Royal Scottish Geographical Society. And I wanted to pick him out in particular because he's one of our Chancellor's Fellows. Our Chancellor's Fellows programme is a programme of investment in outstanding early career researchers recruited from around the world to give us the leaders of tomorrow. And what's really significant, we've got nearly 300 of them now, I think, across the university. What's really significant about them is that they're fulfilling that mission. They are becoming leaders. They are doing research of such distinction that it doesn't just win grants and outstanding publications, it gets that kind of recognition. But also I have to say that our Chancellor's Fellows are often among our most innovative teachers. I think they're taking that leadership role, which we conveyed upon them with that title, extremely seriously. Now, we've got a lot of honorary graduates in this year. Our new principal has noted how many honorary graduates we have, which is rather more than his experience elsewhere, I think. And I'm not going to dwell on them all because we would be here for a very long time. But let me pick out one or two again. The first one, Josh Littlejohn, a very well-known figure locally, for his visionary work in the development of support for homeless people, support both in terms of establishing routes into employment, but also routes into sufficient housing, with a number of very significant initiatives in this city. And a lot of that has been driven and supported and funded by these very, very prominent mass sleep-out exercises. And I was just wondering whether our new principal has yet recognised that because of Josh's presence in the city, he is pretty much required to rough sleep once a year. Jolly good, he's noted that.
Can I choose the month?
The last time they did it, I think the temperature overnight was -6. So yeah. The other person I wanted to pick out is Helga Novotny, an outstanding researcher from ETH in Zurich, who became the head of the European Research Council. The European Research Council, an important wing of EU research funding, which runs what is by common consent the best individual research fellowship programme in the world. And what I mean by the best is the highest levels of competition, really, really strong commitment to peer review to identify excellence. So only really brilliant people get these. And that's something where this university has worked extremely well. We're among the top handful of universities across the EU for getting awards from the European Research Council for achieving at that high level of distinction in the world's best programme. And I think it was very right for us to recognise Helga's work in establishing that commitment to excellence. We'll move through the others and just come to a final few slides in a moment. But a financial review first, though. You can see there, £929 million pounds income. We're heading swiftly towards being a £1 billion institution. This is one of the most significant enterprises in Scotland by some way. And you can see a little bit there how the research distinction of the university is being perpetuated, because our research grant success at a time of shrinking public funding for research is going up. And that bottom figure, up by 36%, that's the research grants won, not yet the money coming into the university, means that the line above it, up by 4%, will be increasing in the next 2 or 3 years, which is excellent news. In the annual review document, you have a month-by-month account of the year. Again, I will only pick out a few of them. August 2016, some of you may well have been there, the opening sound and light spectacular of the Edinburgh International Festival, very much driven by colleagues in the School of Informatics. And you can see one of the fantastic images there. Among the others were when we effectively blew up the castle in a volcanic eruption, which was an extraordinary sight. So this is the university which has blown up the castle. Moving on to December, launching a new climate strategy to be zero carbon neutral by 2040. Which is, I think, a fantastic ambition. Some have said, well, why only by 2040? Well, we're a university which is growing in turnover, it's growing in estate. We are, by virtue of those activities, producing, if we do nothing about it, more carbon. So this is a vision for a growing institution to deal with one of the significant challenges of the age through its own actions. I think it's a very commendable initiative. February, Festival of Creative Learning. We've just had this year's festival. Last year's was also very successful. This is a week which we cleared a few years ago of routine teaching to give a space for academic staff to experiment in their teaching and to think of new and exciting ways of conveying their subjects, and often doing it through experiments in co-design with students. Now a really fixed point of the academic year, and something which I think is really driving on our capacities in learning and teaching. Finally, in May, I'm not from Scotland. there are, I understand, significant rivalries between the east and the west of Scotland, both within the university sector and extending way beyond it. I have to say I don't really understand them, but I do know that they're important. And so it was really important that we beat Glasgow in the boat race. So there we are. We also have in the annual review a number of key stories from activities and events throughout that year. I'm only going to pick out a very small number of them. But Stuart did mention this earlier, the Edinburgh and South East Scotland City deal. We had an agreement in principle to fund that deal last July. With, in principle, the biggest single element of funding in that coming to the University of Edinburgh. We're still negotiating the final agreement around this, which we hope will emerge in the next little while. But it's really about the application of data technologies for the benefit of both private enterprise and the public sector. We think that we can generate a benefit from public investment which repays back 8.5 times over, because we have that kind of experience from people like Colin Adams about how to take new ideas into the economy, and because we think we can work with public sector organisations to make the way they work and the way in which they deliver public services to citizens better than it is now. So in due course, once we have a final agreement, we'll see a programme of investment in facilities, buildings and in data infrastructure, which we think will make this place the data capital of Europe, the most significant centre for data technologies in Europe, and really, apart from a couple of small places in the EU like San Francisco and in the US like San Francisco and Boston, will be pretty much up there as well. So a fantastic opportunity for the university. Next thing I wanted to pick out is a student-led initiative. This is one of my very favourite groups of students. It's a student society, the Hyperloop Society, which has a couple of hundred members from a range of schools, especially engineering and business, and they are working on a new transport technology which, as far as I understand it, consists of building tubes which are more or less vacuums inside and shifting passenger pods within them at unimaginable speeds, which would link Edinburgh and London in 45 minutes, which is quicker than the plane does and somewhat quicker than the train does. This is something that Elon Musk, the very prominent tech entrepreneur, has been promoting through establishing a global competition. And our team has been in the finals for 2 years in a row, and you can see them here out in California demonstrating their technology and by the look of it, enjoying the sunshine. Two more things before I come to a conclusion. The first is a lived experience for you this morning, the McEwan Hall restoration, which I think is an extraordinarily successful renovation. I don't know if you remember being down here in the basement before. It wasn't like this, and it is now a fantastic space for events and activities for the university at graduation and beyond. And one of the most significant aspects of that was the way that our alumni community was mobilised to give support through subscription, and as marked by the bricks outside, which you can read in the corridor, which note that contribution. So this was a fantastic collective enterprise of the university community, and I think it's been very successful. Last thing I wanted to raise was this. It's going back to the European Research Council. There we see a number of our earlier career colleagues who've won early career investigator awards. As I said, these are the most difficult things to get in the world, because this is the best competition in the world. And we've had in the last year £9 million for early career researchers from that programme, as well as the ones that we've had for mid-career and senior professors. And that's one of the reasons why it was so important to recognise Helga Novotny. Conclusion. Well, the university is performing strongly, I think, in various ways. I've pointed to the excellence of our research. We have a very diverse student body, and we have, I think, a really clear and strengthening commitment to make sure that student body has as outstanding an experience as it can. We have no ill effects from Brexit. I put in brackets yet because, as you all know, and yesterday was another little step in that process, we are still unclear as to where we will end up. My betting is on a relatively sensible outcome, a relatively pragmatic outcome, which I think will leave us with a significant degree of continuity in the way that Brexit impacts on higher education. I am touching wood while I'm saying that, though. Something I haven't dwelt upon is the good relationships that we have with Scottish and UK governments. The City deal is one aspect of that. That's a co-funded programme by both. But in various other ways, I think the relationships are strong. And I'd have to note also that while they are governments led by a particular political party, that party may well lose an election at some time. So it is also important to make sure that we're on good terms with those currently in opposition, which we also see as a priority. Final thing there, City deal, it does open up a new chapter. I think we will be able to say more about this when we have this meeting next year. I think it is going to be a very, very significant moment. And there's one final thing which I should note, and that's that. We also managed to recruit an outstanding new principal, which is, of course, a segue into the next part of this agenda item.